So far we had seen about climate stressors and chemical stressors. So how they are related to global climate change. The global climate change basically refers to significant and lasting change in the Earth's climate, particularly in temperature, precipitation pattern and other atmospheric conditions. So these are affected by the chemical and the climate stressors. So these are primarily driven by human activities such as burning of fossil fuel, deforestation and industrial processes. These leads to rapid warming, melting of ice, thawing of permafrost, mainly in the Arctic region. These changes have a very far-reaching impact on the biodiversity, ecosystems, feedback mechanisms and weather patterns. That means increased extreme weather conditions. So these changes in the environmental conditions also leads to increase in the sea level, modification of ecosystem affecting the food security of indigenous people, the cultural preservation is being challenged, and the traditional livelihood of the indigenous communities in the Arctic is affected because of the global climate change. So let us look at the cause and effect relationship between global climate change and the chemical stressors. The environmental variables affect or alters the distribution of fish population. It also affects the timing of bird migrations and prey availability. It causes extreme droughts and heavy precipitation affecting the entire ecosystem dynamics. It also increases the ground level ozone and particulate matter impacting health of all the species. The temperature influences the toxicity of chemicals in the various taxa, and changes in the pH and salinity may alter the chemical behavior. So these are all the effects that are happening because of the change in environmental variables. And if you look at the terrestrial system variable altered by GC, global climate change includes frequency of droughts, extreme precipitation events, regional scale declines in air quality, that is what is called the pollution. So this increases the ground level ozone and it also increases the particulate matter. So how the biota is affected by the global climate change? One is distribution of fish population is affected, and the timing of bird migration we have seen. The major problem is nesting of grounds are also getting affected because of the change in the weather patterns. Similarly, the prey availability. And when we talk about the toxicity effect of chemicals in the variety of taxa, one is a demographic process, another one is a biological effect. When we look at the demographic process, how does it affect? It affects the survival, growth and reproduction of the Arctic species. And if you look at more closely about the biological effect, it alters the gene or protein expression, it affects the metabolic profile, and it also affects the histopathology of the Arctic species. So what are the two major areas? One is the toxicokinetics and another one is the toxicodynamics. These are all the ways the biological assays can be carried out to find out how the GCC effects affect the Arctic species. One is the toxicokinetic studies include absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion. By measuring all these things, we can find out how the global climate change affect the Arctic species. When we talk about the toxicodynamics, the interaction between chemical and the target molecule. Let us look at the global climate challenges to critical process like water balance, thermoregulation, nutrition, immune system, endocrine system and neurological systems. So what are the benefits of understanding the GCC's interactions? Basically, the extrapolation of between species or levels of organization, development of hypothesis, focal areas for further research and improved input for risk and resource injury assessment. So in the accompanying text module, you will get more information about what are the challenges to critical process and the detailed discussion are given there. So how do we identify the interactions? Potential interactions between non-chemical and chemical stressors we have to carry out, and we also look at the key physiological processes that are affected and what are the sensitivity interactions, basically the GCC making organisms more sensitive to chemicals and chemicals making organism more sensitive to GCC stressors. So both are happening, the GCC to species and species to GCC. So here is a chart explaining the interactions between chemical and climate stressors. That's a role for mechanistic toxicology in assessing climate change risk levels. So here are the toxicants details are given here. we can study about the mechanistic toxicity pathways, that is uptake and disposition, molecular interactions, cellular responses and organ responses. Then we finally identify the adverse outcomes, like what are the problems the species are facing. Basically, how the organism responses about the lethality, endocrine dysfunction, carcinogenesis, chronic diseases. All these things, by studying, we will understand how the chemicals are affecting Arctic species. And then finally, the population response, like demographic structure, recruitments, dispersal, genetic changes, and extinction. All these things we can actually identify. So from that, how the toxicant is affecting the communities, we can study. Similarly, if these are the chemical stressors and we look at the climate change parameters, the direct parameters include temperature, precipitation and salinity. Indirect parameters include hypoxia, hyperthermia, disease vectors and food availability. So here we will study about the detection and the signaling changes that is happening, and then we will also try to understand what is the molecular interactions that is happening. For example, signal or receptor interactions, molecular cascades, gene responses that is happening within the species, and then we try to understand the cellular or organ responses due to these climate stressors, how the species is responding to. For example, the change in the metabolic or homeostatic changes, or maybe the structural changes, maybe growth or resorption. All these things we can study. Then based on that, we can identify what are the organism responses, and then what is the population response we can find out. So from this, we can actually identify what is the acclimation outcome from the climate change we can actually study. So the chemical stressors are mainly used for toxicity pathway studies. Climate change stressors are used to study the acclimation pathway.